Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning, and the energy is not too bad. It was terrible last Monday, but it's a lot better today. I hope you're all keeping well. I was looking at something yesterday there was a protest in Dublin between people who want to working class neighbourhoods, and particularly in Dublin, but also for Fermoy and other towns around the country, wanting to know why they're having to bear the brunt of the influx of people, of young males, and they were attacked naturally by a bunch of NGOs and civil servants on their lunch break. But it really brought home that this is really a class issue. It's rooted in nothing else than the hatred of the Irish working class. And it's the same in every country. I mean, things like what happened in Rotherham in the north of England and all those grooming gangs, that was basically happened because of an innate hatred of the English working class. And it's happening in Ireland too. In fact, there was one woman screaming at the crowd going, look at the stadiums. It's just like she was this close to saying, you dirty working class filthy dogs. And it was basically these are all people from NGOs. And an NGO is the dole for an unemployable upper middle class person. That's what the NGOs are, the dole for unemployable upper middle class types. So where they can legally hate the working class. Now, it is a class issue, no doubt about it. Okay, it's as clear as day. Anyone who can't see that is blind, but it's totally class based. And I've been saying for a long time, when they say far right, they mean working class. That's just code for working class. They don't like the fact that their slaves have left the plantation. That's how they see it. But they don't like us anymore, and they don't need us anymore. It's a good thing to look into the history of Marxism as a whole. Now, if you read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, you're actually kind of like disappointed, because it's really just a book of hard economic theory. There's not a lot of philosophical sort of discourse in it. It's actually really just about production and government quotas and this kind of thing, distributions of industrial and other forms of capital and wealth in accordance with an economic philosophy. It's very hardcore economics. If you look at Engels' Das Kapital, that's far more philosophically minded. But early communism and Marxism was very much rooted in economic philosophy rather than political philosophy. Now, the philosophical aspects of it came about later on with things like the Fabian Society in England, and then after that the Frankfurt School and the New School in New York. And this is where you have the cultural Marxism, because these aristocrats who were behind Marxism and socialism realized that the working class were not as stupid as they expected them to be, and didn't want to be treated like slaves. It's the same thing's happening today. But at the same time too, they needed what Marxism is, a psychopathic system, in that it needs, now maybe not say much going back to Karl Marx, but definitely cultural Marxism is definitely a psychopathic system, in that it needs disenfranchised minorities in order to push the Marxist agenda in central government. So, for instance, who was the disenfranchised group in the West? Say from the Industrial Revolution right through to the 1990s. Well, it was the working class. The working class were, they were generally, not always, especially not in Ireland, but in other countries, connected to the trade union movement, and things like the socialists would pander to them and use them as a form of leverage against the prevailing sort of orthodoxies of the time, particularly religion as well, in order to get them to get the Marxism into government creep, the creep show, the mission creep, Marxism into things like national constitutions and government frameworks and planning and so on, very successfully, I might add. And so that was the purpose of the working class. The working class in the West have changed a lot. They they're not, because of the same people who want international socialism are the same ones who had all the factories. That's why lefties today worship corporations and CEOs and the billionaires. They love them and they hate the working class. It's because that's their their delivery method. So think of it as a drug, right? think of Marxism as being like heroin, right? You can get heroin into your body through smoking it, taking it in tablet form, a bong, a cigarette, and also through injection. Now they've moved on to do a direct delivery system of the injection. So just think of like the bong might have been the working class. They've no use for them. Now they have it. Now they have the syringe, and the syringe is woke. Now woke is the prevailing delivery system of cultural Marxism in the world today, and this is why they've discarded the traditional working class. They've always hated the working class. You have to remember that Marxists and those trade union leaders and those like people at Impact, people like David Begg here in Ireland, they had a screaming hatred of the working class, and they all hid that behind what they were Marxists. Marxists putting their agenda through using the working class as a leverage, in order for politics. That's why the Labour Party in Ireland has basically ceased to exist, except for like Ivana Bacik and a few of the woke types. They have no use for the working class anymore. They've been disposed of, and now they can officially hate them. And woke becomes the means to officially hate the working class, and particularly using, immigration issues in particular. But not only that, this is why they're not building houses anymore. They don't care about you. They don't need you anymore. We have been abandoned, after the working class, after being loved bombed by Marxism for all these decades, we've no further use for them. So they've actually, we've got, like a psychopath, are now in the abandonment stage, and we're being going, go away, you, and behave yourself. And here's my new chick, and their new chick is or their new man is the wokies, and the wokies are, as I said, woke and is basically run on NGOs. Now, traditionally, the Orwellian outer party for most Western nations was usually the civil service, and in particular unionized civil service workers, government workers, and they were the Orwellian outer party. Well, they're being slowly dissolved away as well, and the main Orwellian outer party now is the NGOs, but they're made up of the same demographic, middle class and upper middle class who have an overblown sense of entitlement, and that's important because cultural Marxism, it basically works on perceived grievances towards your expectations of life being compromised or denied to you on account of something about you is being prejudiced against. Now, about 10 years ago, I was involved in a group, and there was an extremely wealthy New England homosexual that was actually in the group, and this guy basically had, wealthy Yankee family, but he was an oppressed minority. Why? Because he was gay. So it was being gay gave him the means to be part of a minority, and therefore he was oppressed. So that made him the same level as, say, poor Puerto Rican or Latino women in the ghettos in America. In an overall sense, but also, so any kind of criticism could be deflected from his personality disorders, which were numerous, and particularly his behavior around very young men, which I found and others found extremely disturbing. You were homophobic if you suggested that his boyfriends seemed to be getting very close to school age every year. And so it was almost like a snapshot of the future we live in today. So the Marxists use these minorities as leverages. Now, we live in an age of relatively incredible wealth, The world has been probably never been richer and well off than it is. Standards of living have risen everywhere, and this as a direct result of capitalism. And working class people have done, in general, have done very well from capitalism in recent decades. And if you look at the standard of living of, say, of an Irish or a British working class person in the 80s, say the early 80s, and you compare it to now, it's just unbelievable, the difference, like the amount of disposable income they have. Now, I know we can go into all arguments about fiat currency and debts and all that, but I'm just saying the standard of living is spectacular compared to what it was in the early 80s for a working class person on these islands. Now, that's directly because of capitalism, not because of trade unions, not because of the labor parties, not because of socialism. Directly because of capitalism, opened doors and provided opportunities for people to improve their lifestyle. And many working class people who have no time, most of them have no time for Marxism, nearly all of them, immediately jumped at the chance to improve their lot in life. Now, this is pissed off the middle class. The middle class have always seen themselves as being better than the working class. But when they saw the working class earning the same amount of money and doing just as well by working in trades and stuff like that, because the middle class had no skills, this pissed them off. So we had to be put down again. And they put us down again by flooding our neighborhoods with outsiders. Now, you know me, I'm not anti-immigration as per se. I'm not anti-foreigner. I think it's a great thing to go and work and live in another country. I think immigration are quite powerful things for an individual to experience. But these are different situations. These are you can't be. They're only, for instance, like in Dublin 4, you have the Jury's Hotel, an enormous hotel that's empty, and yet there isn't a single, working, military age man that you have in any of those rooms. While in a place like Ballymun, Finglas, Eastwall, Fermoy, Baraffy, and other towns, they're crammed in. And it's absolutely an assault on the working class. It's to destroy and destabilize working class communities, because working class communities are what? They stand in the way of woke. While a middle class Karen who's obsessed with Twitter likes and Instagram thumbs up would think nothing of handing her son over to a child over to a paedophile if it was considered trendy and fashionable for soccer moms to do. Working class people would murder anyone who tried to come near their child, would actually murder them. Working class people have a greater sense of protection of children and elderly people than the middle class. The middle class put them in homes, and then they give their kids tell them they're a little girl. They put them on hormone blockers and boast about it. There's that's part of the minority. So where the working class might have been the minority that cultural Marxism used, now they create artificial minorities within affluent demographics. Now, there's nothing new about this. I mean, all you have to do is look at the feminist movement. The feminist movement is people like Gloria Steinem and all these wealthy women who are like well off, pretending they were minorities who are being oppressed. And wonderfully, that's changed in recent years, particularly regarding what happened in Scotland recently with that gender bill, which is actually that's already fact in Ireland. It's much worse than what you were planning to get in Scotland. Basically, what they did in Ireland was slip through this gender recognition bill inside a basic civil rights bill on things like legal, marriage, gay marriage and stuff like that, as under the radar, because they knew people found out about it, to be murdered about it. So that's why there was no public debate, and the government deliberately and the NGOs deliberately told the media, don't talk about that. Don't. And the next thing you know, you have all these middle class people saying, "Oh, I'm actually the wrong gender," or "I'm no gender." So it's an invented minority. And because it's sanctified, well, not sanctified, it's basically legally upheld through the recognition bill, they're genuinely, under the eye of the law, a minority. So this is all done to create false minorities. So, and then these NGOs are then designed to create a false civil rights movement. So these NGOs are basically, you can always see it. I mean, you can trace this back a long time. I can only go by the Irish example, but in the late 90s, a glamour model who wasn't even that particularly good looking. She was pretty and everything. She died of a cocaine overdose, and the then Prime Minister Bertie Ahern sent the aide de camp, which is the senior officer, the general or a military man who represents the government on behalf of the military, to her fucking funeral, like a glamour, an it girl, as they were called at the time. An it girl dies of a cocaine overdose, and the Prime Minister of Ireland sends his military attaché to her funeral. Well, that was the start. That was the start of the the sort of like that the Irish state was no longer a state as such, that it was a sort of a branch of the entertainment complex. And you see, that's why like the national broadcasting TV stations are very central to this, and entertainment is very central to this delivery system of this cultural Marxism. Now, as this is so, the actual Marxists have thrown all their lot in with the woke and the upper middle class and the fake victim complexes, and as a result, they don't have any use for the working class, and now they can officially hate them. It's like now sanctified that you can officially. So that's why you have things like, you go and look at these like so-called anti-fascist groups, and it's all people from Dalkey, Foxrock, Clontarf, and all these upper middle class neighbourhoods calling people from Ballymun and East Wall scum, animals. They're finally allowed to actually show their true feelings towards the working class. So it's like, and it's a visceral hatred. It's a murderous hatred, in fact. It's a murderous hatred. And I was watching that thing that happened outside the Shelbourne, and I noticed two different, quite a few things. One was that the what you call the NGOs that were claiming to be pro-open border types were mostly all civil servants who were just on a lunch break, and they were paid to be there. They were repeating phrases they were the human microphone thing that was developed by Tavistock, where basically you have someone who says something and the crowd repeats it. So, everybody welcome, everybody welcome. This is an NPC thing. This is not based on an actual internalized feeling they have inside them. They're robots, and they've been reframed. That's why you have like groups like Common Purpose, and they have things like reframing people. It's a form of brainwashing, really. A lot of it comes out of the MK Ultra thing in the CIA, but reframing and the Tavistock Institute. So the human mic thing was pure Tavistock, and I haven't heard that since the Occupy days 11 years ago. And there used to be some fucking hilarious videos of the Occupy stuff, and they'd go, "We demand that. We demand that. Senator Barry Goldberg, Senator Barry Goldberg, amend the bill concerning unmarried mothers having access to blah, blah, blah. Unmarried mothers having access to blah, blah. Thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you for coming, everybody." They actually repeat the last thing when he said thank you for coming. They were just a robot just repeating. And you could see that at the Stephen's Green thing on Sunday. Now, what another thing that struck me about that was they're all holding up basically signs that were run off at a professional printer. That's always the mark of an NGO. They're all saying the same things. So they gathered outside government buildings, the civil servants on their lunch break, 2 or 4 hour lunch breaks. They probably went shopping in some posh shops in Grafton Street after that. And they were given these signs that were printed out by professional printers and told to hold up, and then the human mic thing. And then they linked arms as if they were protecting each other. Now, the other group, which was much larger, mostly led by the East Wall people, they just kind of walked past them. They didn't really confront with them. And I found that very powerful. There was something about them. It was almost like the East Wall people, the Ballymun people. You could see that the reason why they didn't react, because they've seen that sort of class hatred before. Every single person from Ballymun, Foxrock, Ballymun, East Wall, Finglas, and here's an important thing, Fermoy and other country towns. Those same people from South Dublin who are in those NGOs, they're the same ones you will find that when a person from this part of rural Ireland or from rural Ireland in general moves to Dublin, they will generally always move to the north side of the city to be around working class people or lower middle class people, because north side working class dubs and then the other working class person on the east side and the west, they like Ballyfermot and stuff like that, Clondalkin, they will get on fine with those people. They'll only get condescending remarks if they move into South County Dublin or D4. So you had people from all over Ireland, and this is powerful. Now, again, I want you to carefully listen to what I'm saying here. This is a class war. And the class war is being pushed upon us by the same people whose grandparents were in Dublin Castle, attacking the people who freed this country. I can guarantee you that huge numbers of those people that were at that event, claiming to be the open borders crowd, the NGO crowd, you will find that many of them, their grandpapa and granddaddy, were all in Dublin Castle, going after the people who freed this country. You always remember that. This is one of the biggest problems that ever happened with Irish independence, is that we didn't deal. You see, the founding fathers were too soft. They said, let's forgive and forget, and we need in the civil service, so let's let them keep their jobs in the new state. And that was a mistake, because basically they kept the same people that were, the West British in power through the civil service and stuff like that, and the bureaucracy. So now here's something very important. Those people that were walking by that crowd and that one going, "Lucky is what he is like," what do you like? This kind of like these accents. Those other types, and half of them were like from Fox Rock and stuff like that. The reason why those people that were marching by from the other side didn't shout back really or confront them is because they recognize something they've seen before. They reckon that's why this is a solidarity now between working class people in Dublin and rural people from around the country, and small town people and city people from other cities. There's an instinctual knowing there. Oh yeah, that they're walking by. I can see the looks in the people's faces, whether they were from Fermoy, Limerick, Cork, Galway, Clare, Ballymun, East Wall, Finglas, Ballyfermot. They were looking over at them going, "Oh, I know exactly what you are. I've faced you all my life. You were the one who called me a name, a working class scumbag. You were the one who called me a stupid culture." This kind of thing. And there's a connection there finally. And there's a connection there between working class dubs and people from around the country who finally formed into a very frightening demographic for the establishment. Now, I'm not saying like when people would, you would have working class dubs taking the piss out of people from rural Ireland and vice versa, and provincial Ireland, but it wouldn't have a meanness to it. It'd be a bit of a laugh. I've done it myself, and I've got it myself, and it's funny. I mean, down here in Sligo, I get like lots of jabs about being a dub, like that, and especially from Ballymun. But I know there's no hatred of any kind in it. It's not anything like that. And people from rural Ireland and provincial Ireland go to the north side of Dublin, whatever, and they get the same, and the west side of Dublin, and they get the same thing. But they know that it's just banter. It's just a bit. It's having a crack. But when you go to South Dublin, you are encountered by a very different mentality among certain types. And these are and I know there's lots of decent people in South County Dublin and D4 who are not bigots. They've got money, and they come from they're well-off, comfortable backgrounds, who would be on our side of the working class people, but they'd keep their mouth shut. They're not involved in anything. But there's lots of decent people. There's a certain demographic, rugby club types, that kind of type, and they would be condescending to both working class people from the north and the west side of Dublin and people from provincial Ireland. And that's why they looked at those people in the NGOs, and they went like this. They said, "Oh, I can see." You can see the look in certain women and men's faces. That it's like, I know exactly what you're on about. I've met you before. Before you were calling me a racist, you were calling me a scanger. Before you were calling me a bigot, you were calling me a bogger. I've met you before, guys. They are terrified we finally have a real. They've used things like the church, and in particular the GAA, to drive the divisions between us. That, but finally, for the first time probably in the history of the state, this is monumental. The ordinary Irish people, the real Irish people, have found a cohesive vehicle to band together, whether they're from Limerick, Cork, Dublin, well, Belfast, not Belfast, but like Dundalk, Drogheda, uh, East Wall, Ballymun, Finglas, and that is they finally realise I'm an Irish person. It's like that. It's like, you ever see that famous video of the kitten, a little black kitten, and he discovers his paws, and he goes, I have feet! And it's a really cute video. Well, that's what it's like for the Irish, the true Irish today, that they're like, I'm an Irishman. I'm an Irish woman. I have an identity that goes back at least 6,000 years. My ancestors were like Cuchulainn, the Fina, the people who fought with the Spanish at the Battle of Kinsale, the ones who stayed here after the famine or during the famine when everyone fucked off to America. This kind of thing. We built this country from nothing. We defeated the greatest empire in the world that were next door to us. This is what we are. And they're feeling it now. They're feeling it. And this is why you have the NGOs and the other side becoming increasingly more visceral in their hatred of the working class. And because they're afraid of this giant that has awoken. It frightens them because they did very well out of the Irish state. They did very well. There's something like 6 or 7 billion euros a year going to NGOs to employ unemployable middle class wankers, basically, and dickheads that don't have any, a degree in gender studies or something like that. And their gravy train, they're terrified of that. That's their great. So they have a vested interest in It's not at all hysterical to say that they're literally genocidal. That's what they can't stand, the fact that there's real Irish people in this country. It sickens them to their core. It really does. And when I saw people from Fermoy and Clare and Limerick alongside people from Ballymun, Finglas, Pallyfermot, Clondalk and Tala, I was like, that's Ireland. That's Ireland. That's my people. Fucking deal with it.